Hello there friends, and welcome to my 8th Final Fantasy news update this week in Final Fantasy. Apologies for missing last week's video. I will pick up some of the important stuff from back then and then shove it into this video. And with that, let's just get stuck in. Right, let's start off with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which we've been given a small update for. They do seem to be drip feeding the information to us a little bit, which is fine. I'll take everything I can get, and that is in regards to the voice recordings for the game. Kitase has told Dengeki PlayStation, which is a Japanese gaming news outlet, that the voices are almost finished with recording, which is great to hear. It's obviously quite difficult to say how far along the rest of the development is, or how early this would usually be completed, but all the scenarios and dialogue for those scenarios would have to have been written prior to this, since they would probably like to try and avoid calling back voice actors like they're having to do for Final Fantasy XV. So it doesn't tell us that much else, but the frame for the game is at least there. Okay, so Final Fantasy XIV had a mini patch this week, patch 3.55a, which saw the release of the Proto Ultima fight, which drops item level 270 accessories, some of which are best in slot. There has been some criticism of its implementation though. It had been marketed as a 24-man battle, and I think the implication of that was that it was like a 24-man trial, which would have been the first of its kind. Instead, he was added into Doom's Scathe, the existing 24-man raid, which was added back in 3.55. Judging from the general community reaction, this wasn't what people wanted. But I don't believe it was that bad a decision. It makes the fight easily accessible to the majority of players, and let's face it, a 24-man trial that drops accessories would be a pain. You'd have massive difficulties in filling the queues, especially for a prolonged amount of time. And then balancing a single fight for so many players, the chances of a group finding it either painstakingly easy or impossibly hard is quite high. But when it's added as part of an existing raid, the individual difficulty of that particular battle is less important. And looking to the future as well, it's pretty likely that we'll see some reason to go back and do the Shadows of Mac raids when we're in Stormblood. By adding Proto Ultima in here, we get to experience it anytime we do Doom's Scathe. But if he was given his own trial, the chance of us having to go back later to do him would be pretty slim. 3.55a also introduced Zloe Aliepo, the lovable young cat girl who is trying to run an orphanage in Idleshire. She asks the player to provide her with certain materials through a new system called custom deliveries, so that she can flog them and help pay for the rent, the food, and just keeping the orphanage going. And these items are obtained exclusively through crafting and gathering. In return, she will pay you in scripts, and it's a super quick way to get a large portion of your weekly red scripts if you're into that. You'll also begin to build a relationship with Zloe, which is a new system introduced here. As you become more familiar with an NPC, they will reveal more about themselves and their story, as well as offer you tougher missions and better rewards. So expect this to be something bigger than just Zloe moving forward. The Anima weapon can also be upgraded to its final form in this patch, and there was also a nerf to a particularly lengthy Umbrite step, so Umbrite now costs half the tomestones, and you now have additional means of collecting crystal sands. Small update to PvP as well. The Feast saw a new map that you can fight in, and that will be selected at random when you sign up for it, and we've also seen the start of PvP Season 4. Finally, there's a few more optional items for sale on the Mog Station, so if you want to be a Lalafell with your arse in the air, that is now possible for you to do. Rightio, a couple of new things from Final Fantasy XV now. First off, the small spin-off game, A King's Tale, which came bundled with pre-orders from certain retailers, is now available for everyone for free from the PlayStation Store. It's non-canon, but it is a fun little thing to kill an hour or two if you're feeling some withdrawal symptoms from Final Fantasy XV. We have also seen a tech demo showcase for Final Fantasy XV running on the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080. Which is a pretty high-end card, but it is looking very sexy. And we got a little sneak peek at Cerberus in there as well, which means that his model and animations are complete, so I suspect we'll see him in an update sometime soon. Let's move on then to the mobile side of the Final Fantasy universe, as always starting with Mobius Final Fantasy. Chapter 4 Part 2 was released on the 2nd of March, which has the Warrior of Light facing off yet again against Chaos. It gives plenty of lovely loot for you, an increased level cap, and also unlocks more of the Chaos Vortex as well. The latest batch of jobs, which will include Rogue, Berserker and Occultist, otherwise known as Margin, on the Japanese version is being staggered in, so Rogue was released on the 2nd, we'll see Berserker coming in on the 9th, and Occultist sometime soon after that, though we don't actually have a date for him yet. Also on the 9th, the Dark and Light Sicarius battles will be introduced, so it's Anima's week from the 9th to the 16th, and then Ultima from the 16th to the 23rd. Finally, from the 9th, the Ace Striker legendary job will be added to the Greater Ability Summon pool as a bonus in the same way that the Soldier First class was. It looks as though this is going to be the way we acquire legendary jobs from now on, so if you missed him back when he was behind a paywall, you now have a chance at nabbing him. I really wouldn't go all out and try and pull any legendary job in this way unless you're a proper whale, but now at least there is that chance at getting them as a bonus. And that's it really from Mobius this week, so let's move on to Brave Exvius. So there was a pretty big update for it on the 23rd, which saw the game's 2.0 update, which added a shit ton of quality of life stuff, including a reorganized menu, optimization with the summoning process, so now if you get a yellow crystal, you're guaranteed to get a 4-star base unit, and Rainbow guarantees a 5-star, as opposed to before where you could receive a base 3-star with a yellow crystal. Basically, it's sort of alleviated some of the RNG, particularly if you do the 10+1 summon. There's also more trophies among other good stuff. We also saw more of the Zoldard region open up with 7 new locations to visit and plunder. And if you've missed it somehow, if you're on hiatus perhaps, there's currently a celebration for the game reaching 20 million worldwide downloads, which will give you a free 10+1 summon, which is the equivalent to 5,000 Lapis, so ensure that if you haven't, you take advantage of that. As for the stuff this week, the Final Fantasy Type 0 event, Operation MA Demolition, has begun, which is your standard collect a load of resources and hand it in to King Mog for some fat old loots. And with it came a new banner which introduces 4 more of the Agito cadets, 8 and Sync at 3-star base, 9 at 4-star and Queen at 5-star. Let's take a little look-see at Record Keeper then. Still continuing their celebrations for their 2nd year anniversary, there are some special activities lined up. Right now there's a Final Fantasy quiz that's available to play on your phone or tablet, and you can find a link to that in-game. That will end tomorrow, but there will be another event like this coming up on the 9th. When players collectively reach a certain score from these mini-games, everyone will be rewarded with some free shit, so that's 4 Mithril and 10 giant Scarlatites this time around. Outside of the anniversary stuff, there is the Final Fantasy XII event Blood Rain, which is coming to an end pretty soon, as well as its associated banners, and the Final Fantasy VII Vow Upon a Star event will be continuing until this time next week. Later on this week we will also be seeing the Final Fantasy XIII Of Lies and Love event, so go ahead and get a team prepped for that. Finally, we've also had another mobile Final Fantasy game announced for Android and iOS in Japan. This one is called Final Fantasy Explorers Force, and presumably will share similarities to the 3DS game Final Fantasy Explorers. There's been a couple of screenshots shared. They've moved away from the chibi art style from the 3DS game, which is good, and I shall let you know when it comes a little bit closer to release or when we hear any more news. And that is pretty much it from the Final Fantasy universe this week. I hope you enjoyed listening. If you did, you can let me know via a like, comment or subscribe. As always guys, thank you for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.